How are you all doing today? Well, that's like a Louis Rossmann impersonation, I suppose. And like Louis, I can geek out on microphones. Here's my RE 50B, and this is sort of a reporter's microphone, so you can hold it like this, and you don't get a lot of noise if you rustle the cables up to the microphone. Anyway, I like this microphone. It's one of many microphones I have. But we won't geek out about microphones today. Another thing that Louis and I have in common is we both grew up in Staten Island, essentially. I moved there when I was around 6 years old. I was born in California, moved to England for 4 years. My father was a journalist. We ended up in Staten Island until I went to college. I went to Curtis High School, which was more of the black school in those days. I don't know what it's like now. Louis went to Wagner, sort of the white school up on the hill. But I might have it all wrong. I'm just making jokes here. Anyway, we're both from Staten Island. I'm 64 years old. I think Louis is around 36. So we're almost like 30 years difference. One generation difference. Excuse my dog. So unlike Louis, we have a dog. So I want to talk about. I'm trying to think about. I did a first video. So I've been basically battling this 32-bit float fraud for a couple of years. So you know how Louis battles all these various right to repair with Apple, companies that do fraudulent business practices that take your data, stuff like that. Well, I do it myself too in a very small part of the tech world. Now, I used to do it about shooting log gammas in video, but I won't get into that. It's very long. It's a complex subject. But with 32-bit float, I thought, okay, well, this is a very narrow thing. It should be easy for me to to convince people that manufacturers are screwing them when they say that you can prevent clipping by using 32-bit float. Now, actually, I didn't know this right at the beginning. All right, Benji, come on up. This is Benji. Yeah, he's no Clinton. So I felt. And I didn't really care that much about the technology. Just when it first came out, just like Louis, when I see somebody lie, there's something inside me just starts to boil. And when I saw this marketing guy from Rode Microphones say that the gain knob was obsolete with 32-bit float and it eliminated clipping, I was just like, I don't think that's true. Like, I had an idea why it wasn't true, but I didn't know for sure. So I did a lot of testing. I bought the devices. I literally spent probably like 100 hours until I could confidently say, no, it doesn't fix clipping or make the gain knob obsolete. So I went to there are many YouTubers that were saying it, and I leave comments saying, no, I don't think it works this way. Nobody ever commented back, hey, why? Max, can you explain it? No, none of these big YouTubers were interested in. And I'm sure this is something Louis will also agree and sees. Anyway. The only YouTuber I thought that might sort of understand would be Curtis Judd. And so I got into it a little bit with Curtis Judd because he's a very polite guy. He responded, whatever. But ultimately, after a while, he's like, don't email me, don't contact me, leave me alone. Right? So I was like, all right, fine. And I should mention that Louis recently had written Curtis a question about one of his Sennheiser mic things during this 32-bit float thing, right? And Curtis even did a little video talking back about it. Anyway, Curtis is just a great guy. He does great videos. Really, Curtis is the kind of guy, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say it. So anyway, after maybe a year or so, yeah, Curtis, I left a nice comment on one of Curtis's videos. He said, hey, that's great, Max, how you doing, whatever. So anyway, we became friendly again, and we started talking about 32-bit float again. And in Curtis's videos, he changed what he was saying. He wouldn't say it was a fraud. He wouldn't say it wouldn't work, but he definitely no longer would say, hey, it fixes clipping or you don't need the gain knob or anything like that. So he completely backed off. But Curtis is just the kind of guy where, he's just, you don't have something nice. If you don't have something nice to say, don't say it. Louis and I share this, no, we're not like that. Something is false, it's false. We're going to hammer on it and just keep on hammering on it. So anyway, I was spending a couple of years doing it. And I think the other fascinating thing to me that I want to see about 32-bit float is if you look at all the problems in the world, right? There's so many problems. Like why is there war in Ukraine? Why are we giving bombs to Israelis to blow up people's homes, right, with women and children inside them, right? I mean, it's crazy stuff. Like, what is going on? And actually, that stuff I have a much greater interest in. But I'm like, okay, in any sort of realm of human society, if we see something wrong, what's working against us if we want to point it out? So like 32-bit float is such a small little thing, right? It's just like a minor thing. Like, why would anybody care? You would think, okay, if a videographer buys something from Rode or Zoom or Tascam or Panasonic or whoever are spreading this bullshit, or even sound devices, how do you convince somebody that it's not correct? And it's remarkably difficult, right? Again, you would think theoretically somebody would be like, who cares about 30-bit float? Fine. Oh, yeah, I see. I follow your logic. It's right. But you can't, because they have an emotional attachment to their equipment. Like, this is not a good example, but just pretend this is like this isn't well, actually, these DJI does record 32-bit. Well, let me do this in the microphone, right? So here's the DJI, right, the wireless mics, right? They do record 32-bit internally, but DJI doesn't make a huge big thing about it, like no gain knob and crap like that. It's just going with the industry. Anyway, but let's just say this is a Rode thing. Like, you have like this emotional attachment to your technology, and you're like, oh wait, you're criticizing my technology, and then you turn your ears off, and then you're the problem, right? I mean, that's what I get. So it doesn't make a difference how small or big any sort of thing is about technology. If a person has a whatever, like an emotional relationship to that equipment, they will not listen to you. Not only that, they will attack you. And so it's just, it's a big problem. So when Lewis did a video where he said in the video, oh, 32-bit float, this doesn't really fix clipping. It's not like, it's fake, right? Like, it's not, DJI doesn't really do it like, like Sennheiser does it. Though he didn't really test it. Like, his tests were really silly, right? Jingling keys. I mean, I was like laughing, like, Lewis, what are you doing? So, anyway, so but he did it. So I thought, okay, well, here's a guy with 2.5 million followers, right, that aren't really in the tech space. So maybe we can, now that he's brought up the question of 32-bit float, I can like, hey, Lewis, no, I don't think it's right. And so, not that I thought it was going to go this way. He's been very busy with the flock stuff, right, in Denver and whatever. So these past few weeks, he's been traveling, busy. I really don't expect him to answer, right, right away or ever really. Again, he's a busy guy. But the funny thing is, he got it wrong about well, I'm getting into rabbit holes again. Anyway, so he brought up 32-bit float. So I thought, okay, well, it's a good thing. I'll say, hey, Lewis, you're wrong about 32-bit float. Now, Lewis, because, again, I think, he sort of thinks similar, and because he's really not into, I mean, to him, a technical fact is a technical fact. And the thing that he has that Curtis doesn't have is he works with electronics. The reason it's difficult to understand why 32-bit float doesn't work unless you understand how the electronics work, unless you understand how preamps take very small microphone voltages like this and bringing them up to over a volt to deal with, and then what the signal they can capture from a microphone to get into this audio to digital converter without noise, and then ultimately record it. You have to sort of know that part of the chain to understand why it doesn't work. And Curtis doesn't work with electronics, so he doesn't know that. So I'm saying, hey, listen, Curtis, the ADC can only get the very small microphone voltage. You have to pick. The gain knob is about picking a window of this voltage. You can't take the whole dynamic range voltage of a microphone and record it. You just can't. You have to first bring the voltage up to a voltage that the electronics can deal with it, and that's over a volt. And then you have to pick this window. You can't pick the whole thing because you just get noise or distortion at one end. So you pick your window from that, and then you can write it to data. But wherever you pick the window, you're going to get a bunch of noise. So really, the only effective part you're capturing is basically maybe 60 dB in dynamic range or something like 86 or whatever. You're just picking up a small part. And so the whole idea that 32-bit float would fix clipping would assume that you can basically get more data, right? That there's more data available that you couldn't get in 16-bit or 24-bit. And now with 32-bit float, you can put that extra data in there and fix clipping. It makes sense intuitively, theoretically, but doesn't make any sense to a person who works with electronics in a practical way, which is Lewis. So I expected if Lewis ever did watch my video, he's going to get it immediately. He's going to be like, yeah, it's, the microphone, you get only so much data, so 32-bit float would have nothing to do with the clipping. And then for the gain knob, it has nothing to do with the gain knob because, again, the preamp of a mic is there for you to set which part of the voltage you want to focus on. And you have to pick. There's no like, the only microphones that don't have gain knobs in a sense are, inexpensive microphones, right? Where they're just tuned to expect like an interview or a voice or whatever. Do you know what I'm saying? They're not tuned for an aircraft engine. They're not tuned to read, to listen to little small insects, 50 feet away. So anyway, that's why I wanted to, I was excited that Lewis was covering 32-bit float because I'm like, okay, fine, great. There's another guy that understands electronics that can look into it, has a large audience, will look at my argument and say, hey, yeah, Max is right. Like, I wasn't really thinking about it. It's just like a hobby of mine. I wasn't really, but yeah, 32-bit float's effing bullshit, And in fact, I won't be surprised if there's a class action suit against these companies. But, I won't go down that road. But, maybe Lewis will even go after them. But again, because it's such a small part, 32-bit float, who cares? Like, really? But I'm telling you, if you paid more money for some audio device because you thought 32-bit float made the gain knob obsolete or reduced clipping, you were ripped off, okay? But you have to get past that point that, yes, you were a sucker. And many people don't want to do that. They just don't. I don't want to hear it, right? They'd rather just know that they screwed up a little bit. So like I work in finances, and I see this throughout my life, right? I mean, if somebody buys like a bad mutual fund, right, or a bad investment, you would think it'd be very easy to say, hey, you bought a bad investment, you should get out and go do something else. But you have to have a lot of confidence. People don't like recognizing that they're stupid. I don't like it either. Like, I get it too. Like, I don't want to know. It's an emotional thing. So people don't get out of bad investments because when you do it, you are recognizing that you screwed up. So if you say, oh, I'm returning my Rode, device, I'm recognizing that I'm screwed up, and I don't want to do that. I'd rather just keep it. Because at the end of the day, 32-bit float, it doesn't make the device any worse. It's not like I'm saying like 32-bit float is worse than recording in 24-bit or 16-bit. It's not. It's some extra data. You're throwing out data for nothing. But okay, it's not making it worse. In a practical way, it's fine. Where I get upset is that your knowledge is bad because you're now recording things. You're not setting the gain or anything. You're not worrying about clipping, and you're going to get screwed because you're wrong. You should understand how the technology works. You should set the gain correctly. Anyway, enough on the 32-bit float stuff. But anyway, I just wanted to explain why I originally did the video about Lewis, and then I did a second video to explain, well, why are people getting upset at me about this? And I wanted to point out, the whole social, psychological, whatever emotional mindset that we have towards tech, which I think Lewis doesn't quite, which I think he doesn't cover, okay? Let's put that in a nice way. So, just not saying he doesn't cover, right? His main thing is that, you should own a device, and companies get in the way of that ownership, that they're whatever, right? I don't agree with that. It's a long story, but I wanted to tell another story. It was funny. So I wrote a script for this video, and I could see I'm just going to have to do that another day. But the story I wanted to tell is so again, we both grew up in Staten Island, and I was an editor of the newspaper. And I originally, Ms. Traphus wouldn't let me be an editor because I couldn't write. So I'm actually a pretty successful writer now, but it was a struggle. And back then, anyway, I wanted to write. She's like, you can't write. But then, when they're going to start the newspaper, they had nobody to cover sports. I had zero interest in sports. Like, I was interested in science. Probably all the stuff, same stuff Lewis is interested in. But she's like, if you want to be the sports editor, you can. I'm like, well, it's better than nothing, right? So I joined the Curtis Log, as the sports editor, right? Covering something I have absolutely no interest in. Even though I ran track and field, but who counts that in high school? Anyway, so back then. Anyway, so I'm the editor of the newspaper, and we would get tickets for various things, which is a great thing. So we got tickets for a play, Mrs. Margarita's Way, or I think Miss Margarita's Way. Yes, Miss Margarita's Way on Broadway, but by Estelle Parsons. And so these invites were sent to high schools all over New York City. So, whatever reason, the other co-editors, the real co-editors, that were illiterate, didn't want to go or couldn't go, or maybe they came to, I don't remember. Anyway, so we went to Manhattan, which is exciting for me. Again, this is like 1978, 1979. So let me just show you. So here's this book from the bookshelf. I got a comment saying, put more books there so you can look smarter. Like, I just don't know how to deal with you people. I mean you young, non-book reader. Anyway, it's signed here by Estelle Parsons. So, why did she assign Great Expectations? Because it was a book, right, in high school that I was assigned. So I had the book with me that I'm supposed to read. I don't know if I actually ever read the whole thing. But anyway, the high school I was supposed to read. I had it with me, so when I went on stage, I got her to sign it, which was great. Anyway, but before that, so we sit down and we watch this play, and this has a lot to do with Lewis, don't worry. So we sit down and watch this play, and the basic format of the play, I don't remember what it's about. It's probably over my head at the time even. So she's basically a teacher. The play's written by a South American. He's from Brazil or Argentina, I forget where, Ecuador, whatever. So the play is about this teacher, and she's basically a fascist. And she's yelling at her class, you do this and you do that, and the problem with you is this, and the problem with you is that. So it's basically that's sort of her character. So it's a one-woman play, I think. Maybe one other person was in it. Anyway, it's Estelle Parsons, right? And she's somewhat a famous actress at the time, right? Obviously, she's doing a one-woman play on Broadway. And so she's yelling at the audience, right? So we in the audience, right, we're all like high school kids, right? We're supposed to be the smartest high school kids in the city, right? Because, again, we're all the editors from newspapers. And so we're sitting there, and she's yelling at us, about this and about that. It's all like, I'm sure, like very sophisticated political stuff about, the government and whatever. Anyway, she's yelling at us the whole time, right? But the play is about politics, I'm sure, right? The play is about how we deal with each other socially, like how we view power, how power is applied, many of these things, right? Anyway, she's yelling at us, and then intermission. So intermission comes, and what happens is it wasn't my first, I don't think I went and did anything, but many people in the audience got up, walked down to the stage, pulled the drawers out of her desk, ripped up all the books, went to the chalkboard, drew pictures of dicks and curses, and tore the stage apart during intermission, right? Because they're kids, they're high school kids yelled at by a teacher. The teacher left the room, and now it's fair game, right? So, all the students do attack the room while she's gone. So okay, so they do that. She comes back, and then she does the second half of the play. Like stagehands come up, clean up best they can, whatever. And then after the play is over, she's supposed to have a question and answer period with the students. So the play ends, we wait a while, and then she comes out on the stage, and she looks at us, and she just gives me this look like, what is your problem? Like, you can't even comprehend, how New York City's best and brightest high school students could be such effing knuckleheads, right? And so anyway, she answers some questions, and in, I can't remember the question I answered. I asked her anyway. She's just. But I was thinking, she did a great job because, a bad actress, right, or actor wouldn't elicit that response. She was so effective in her role of really just talking down to the class that the class, erupted in this way. But the reason I'm telling the story is because it illustrates sort of the core problem that I face. I think that Lewis faces, so he isn't really as aware of it because he's always like hard charging. He's always like going after people. He's probably doing this for years. He just doesn't sit back and just think about, wait, like what is sort of, what are some of the bigger picture things going on? When I did that last video, I spent hours on it, being very careful not to basically make it personal against Lewis, which is sort of my thing. Again, it's Lewis's thing too. Like, no, attack first, right? Don't worry about it. We're all grown men here, or grown whatever. We can handle it. So, but I was just very careful. I didn't want to do that, and it doesn't make a difference. Like how many times I should have saved to Reddit, but I was very clear. I said, listen, this isn't Lewis's fault. I'm not blaming Lewis. Lewis does tell people to do more, so I qualify everything. If you look at go read the transcript of that video, you'll see I never say, hey, this is Lewis's fault, or Lewis should tell you to boycott or anything like that. I'm very careful, but it doesn't make a difference because we're emotionally attuned to things. So I could talk about all the work Lewis or any person is doing. I could talk for half an hour about what they're doing. But if I say at the end of that, yeah, but you know what, we were playing chess one day and they cheated, they moved their thing, they're a jerk, right? And you like that person a lot, that's all you're going to remember. All you're going to pick out of somebody talking about some issues with somebody else is if they badmouth your friend, then screw them, right? And so that's how we're wired. Me too, I'm not above it. But I work very hard not to do it. I mean, that's what you need. That's what you sort of need to do. It's sort of one of the points in my video. It's sort of what I'm talking about with, Miss Margarita's Way. Like, that play is talking about these issues, but it's yelling at you. And the students are only hearing, hey, you're yelling at me. I'm going to go get you back, right? And people watch my video. They're not thinking about 32-bit float. They're not thinking about the subtleties of what ownership of a phone means and what property is. Like, do we have a right to repair it ourselves? These are all complex things, by the way, because this is a social device. This is a device that connects us socially. But anyway, no, we don't hear that. We just hear if somebody's insulting our friend. And this is, covered by Aristotle and his rhetoric. This is thousands of years old. This is not anything new about humans understanding their own psychology. So anyway, I think I've gone on long enough. And maybe I'll do another video where I get into to a lot of stuff that's very interesting about our phones and our devices. They're not what makes them property. Like, what makes anything property? Is this chair really mine? Is the house, who really owns this house? So that's all a fascinating thing. It's really very important to talk about when you talk about this stuff, right? Because it's not as simple, in my opinion, as Lewis points it out. And again, with the 32-bit float, he was a conduit to talk about an issue of a claim about technology, about whether it's true or false and how you talk about it. And I was hoping to use, anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. I hope these stories, I hope you found them interesting. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.